Yeah? Amazing. How's everyone doing? Yeah? Are you having fun? How was that last panel? You guys looked like you were really into it, like really loving it, yeah? Amazing, okay. Well, thank you for joining us. The topic of this session is the impact of AI on industry and society. And with me to discuss it is a legend. He is Sachin Duggal. He is the founder and chief wizard of Builder.ai, which is actually a unicorn AI company. And this is a massive topic, right? And we've only got 20 minutes to discuss it. So I'm very interested to see what Sachin can pull out of his wizard sleeve in enlightening us on this topic. Sachin, great to see you again, man.
Thank you for having me here.
Let's start off with some big questions. So the famous historian and author Yuval Noah Harari has called the AI a social weapon of mass destruction. He believes that AI is the first technology in history to actually take power away from humans as opposed to give power to us. That is obviously a very dystopian perspective. On the flip side, legendary investor, Silicon Valley investor Mark Andreessen Horowitz says that AI will actually save humanity. So these are obviously very different perspectives. The truth is probably going to be somewhere in the middle, but I'd like your view on where you sit along this spectrum and where do you see the impact of AI on society in the next 25 years or so, in broad terms?
Look, I think you have to take a view that any major technology evolution, take nuclear, it had a huge plus from an energy perspective and a huge negative from an arms perspective, but also some people argue that a huge positive from an arms perspective. No one wants the race to start. I think if you think about the advent of the Industrial Revolution, people say, well, kids are working in factories, what are they going to do? The flip side is kids went to school, you actually had the Industrial Revolution go into the Information Revolution, and look at where we are today. You know, I think it's the power is so much in how we decide to use it and what are the motivations for creating it. So, you know, there are lots of really good examples, and I was sort of discussing one earlier on today, which is, you know, imagine you're wearing an intelligent ring. You go to sleep. In the middle of the night, it detects an irregular heartbeat. So it's like, this looks like a bit of a problem. Calls the doctor, makes an appointment, shifts your calendar, pushes your coffee back, organizes a car to take you, and starts to play calming music to wake you up and sort of get you going. All of that happened while you were sleeping. Today, you wouldn't have that efficiency. You would have probably a battalion of folks around to try and make it happen, or you would need to pre-plan and move, and actually that overhead in itself creates more stress. And so, you know, these are really powerful day-to-day instant benefit of where I think the technology is going, so taking Mark's opinion. At the same time, you know, Yuval also wrote in his book that there are 10,000 things that one human would never tell another human. It's somewhere in the middle of Homo sapiens. And it's because we'd just be so embarrassed. But actually, we would say it to an AI because it's not a human and it doesn't have the fabric that we rely on, the empathy and everything else. And so you have the risk of, like, you know, just being your unfiltered self, which I think is problematic in itself. So I do sit somewhere in the middle, and I think it comes down to the use.
Okay, interesting. But what about this kind of major paranoia about the fact that AI is going to take our jobs, right? I mean, perhaps this time it's different because we've obviously had the industrial revolution, the electrical revolution, the internet revolution, the mobile revolution, but none of those were cognitive. Now we're seeing a technology that actually has cognitive capability, decision-making capability. Do you think this time is different, or is it just going to be like any of the previous technological revolutions?
So I'd push back. Number one, I don't think language models have cognitive ability. They have something that tends to cognitive ability.
But it will evolve in that direction, surely.
I think the technology will need a whole reboot, including being multidisciplinary to be truly cognitive. I think what you're seeing right now is if you give it enough words and enough data, it can approximate to cognitive, which is also why it confabulates or hallucinates.
Right.
I think the thing to keep in mind though is the technology is still really early. Because it's early, you have to take it for what it's good at, right? And so when you think about the jobs question, there are two things where AI is very powerful. One is removing human variability. I said this in the plenary session, which is human beings generally hate doing the same thing 100 times. We find it boring. Boredom kicks in and then quality goes down the toilet. Similarly, there are things I do in the day that I used to do in 2022 I don't do anymore. I used to make notes in meetings. Actually, that was really annoying because I'm the kind of person that can either listen or write, and I find it very hard to do both. Now I can just be really engaged in the conversation, make a couple of notes, just bullets to sort of steer my discussion. But I know I'm covered. Like something's listening, making notes, and I can ask it any set of questions. And so has it replaced my job? No. What it's done, and I think you're going to see this at least for the next 5 years, is it's going to take away tasks that I was doing. And it's going to elevate me up, so it's going to give me superpowers. So actually, I give you another really good example. I often do these meetings where it's a couple of hours, and it's a review. I'm sure we've all done quarterly reviews and so on and so forth. And in my review meetings, before, I would have to sit and read. And it'd be like 20 pages, I'd read, make notes, scribbles, so that when I went in the meeting, I was being semi-intelligent. I'm not fully intelligent, but semi-intelligent. Now, I can wake up that morning, I have all the pre-reads, I give it to the large language model, and I say, get me this into 3 paragraphs. And can you highlight specific points that I need to drill in on? Here's what I'm concerned about. And I actually have it summarized in short take for me to do. And that was a task that I was doing, or was a task my chief of staff was doing, or someone else was doing, but they can also now elevate. And so instead of saying, summarize this for me, it's from this summary, what do you think am I missing that we need to do some homework on?
So on that point, I'd like to ask the audience a question. So how many of you in the audience have ever used ChatGPT? Put your hands up. Okay, and keep your hand up if you use it every day. Okay, so a fewer number of people. So obviously everyone's tried it. Of course, it's passed the Turing test. Who wouldn't try it? But the number of people who use it on a daily basis has obviously diminished with time. What do you think is necessary for us to get to the point where everyone's hand stays up, where everyone's using it every day? What's the next iteration? What does that look like?
So look, I think the first thing is, let's not confuse generative AI with AI, and let's not confuse ChatGPT with generative.
Of course.
Because I think the problem is that in some conversations, it's like one thought.
Right, fully
They're
agree.
hugely different bubbles.
Fully agree.
So I think the second is, people think about using an LLM much like they use search. One big question and I get an answer. But it's a language model. So you need to engage in language with it. So actually, to make the most out of a language model, you need to have a conversation with it. I don't know about you or me, but I don't have my first conversation as, could you tell me the answer to this? Never met you before. So actually you're saying, hey, listen, I'm so-and-so. I'm setting context.
Context, yeah.
Right? This is my company. Have you heard of it? And then it will come back and say, yeah, I've heard of Builder.ai. This is what it does, da-da-da-da. Great. So as the CEO of Builder.ai, as the chief wizard of Builder, I'm trying to solve this problem. And so what I'm doing is I'm layering the context. So I give you another good example of what I've done, and I use Claude for this. So Claude has this concept of projects, where you can upload files. And so there's things that I do very often, like learning documents. So at Builder, a learning document, it's a new concept we rolled out, which is, what do we learn and how does it go back to our core values and our way of life? So I uploaded the way of life, I uploaded the core values, I gave it some examples of documents I wrote. And then now this is the killer, what I do. I take a screenshot of a conversation on Slack, I paste it in, I'm like, here's why I'm annoyed with this conversation, or here's what I think went wrong with this conversation, write me a learning document. So in 5 minutes, it gives me, I've got a good version. Then I read the learning document. I'm like, well, I don't agree with this, change this, I don't like this, I wouldn't, and I don't use that word, change this, so on and so forth. And in 10 minutes, I've done what I would have done in an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Amazing. I'd actually like to ask you about Builder.ai since you touched upon it. In very, very one sentence or two sentences, tell us, what does Builder.ai do and what problem does it solve?
Well, since we're in an AI conference, we are prompt to application. If we unwrap that a little bit more, we're voice or conversation to application, to a piece of software. So you could, if we unwrap that a little bit more, it's like Lego got married to AI to build software applications, right? And for us, there are so many of you in the audience right now. I'm sure you've had an idea, or you have a problem you want to solve, or you have a task that you want to achieve, right? You need software to solve that problem, but you're not software engineers. You don't want to go hire a consultant. You're not product managers. So at Builder, our view is the average person building software is not technical now, but they need the outcome. Using conversational AI and the wider AI stack and reusable features, we're allowing people to build rich software applications, much like you would order Domino's pizza.
So it's no code, basically.
It's composable software.
Composable.
The difference is, in no code and low code, you're given a canvas. And you're like, go build your app.
Right.
I don't know about you, but my mom couldn't use no code, low code. But my mom can use Builder. A grandmother couldn't use no code, low code. But everybody can talk. And I think this is the difference. We've made the user interface conversational.
Fine. So basically, you've made software development conversational.
Yes.
So what happens to all the software developers then? Going back to the point around job displacement. If you were advising someone who was going to go to university, study computer science, and become a software developer, do you think that's still a wise career choice? What would you advise that person to do?
So I think it's really important that we don't fall into the trap of all software developers are gone. Let's look at the data, right? So for every unit of supply, every developer, there's about 22 units of demand today. We just don't have enough developers to build the software we currently need before all of you start coming out with great ideas to do at 6 in the morning that you want to build to improve your work-life balance or to improve your work or to be a founder. So that problem is only going to get worse. Second thing, there's about 10,000 people in the world today that built login. That just seems daft.
That build login.
Login feature.
Right.
Every day there's 10,000 people that build login. Well, how is that 10,000 different from yesterday's 10,000?
But isn't there like a library on GitHub you could just pull in and just,
right,
like,
but
isn't it reusable?
But it's not really usable. And the thing is, people are still writing it. And I'll give you another one. How many people have built a Stripe integration? Yeah, there's a library. You have to configure it. You have to do all those things. And so what we really realize is that 80% of software is the same stuff. And it's like Lego. So we said, okay, what if we could take all of these features, and by the way, they're not that many features, only 600, and we made them into Lego. We bring the Lego together, and now we never need to rebuild out those blocks again. So then what's unique about your idea? Might be a custom feature, might be an integration, might be a unique bit of IP. That's where you will use a combination of code generation and a human developer.
But you need to answer my question about software developers. Like, would you still recommend people go and study software development at university or become software developers?
Right, so that's a good point. Sorry, I didn't answer your question. I have never recommended people go be software developers. I have said people go do engineering, computer science, and they're fundamentally different. Software development is a linguistic skill. I am basically writing in a language, being given an input in an English language. Generally, software developers are not the same as computer scientists.
Right.
Computer scientists are engineers that are thinking about a problem, how to break it down, how to approach it.
Got it.
They're building the language models.
Got it.
They're building the IoTs and the integration.
Right, so you'd say go become computer science, but don't become a software developer.
I would even go in.
Your language is going to become obsolete. It's going to be replaced by English.
Right, exactly. And my point is, it's even more. I would even say the biggest thing that we're trying to solve for is if kids are going to school now, it's about critical thinking. Really, we want to stay away from STEM. You want to build polymaths. Like this era we're in is the closest era to Da Vinci's era that we've ever seen. Right? And you need people that are doing art, poetry, literature, philosophy, as well as math. And I think the last thing I'd say to you is, and this is the thing that frightens me the most. Imagine today there's a person on the shop front, a good salesperson. Whose skill is being a good salesperson? Is it your skill because you're on the shop front? Is it your boss's skill because you're in that company? Who owns that skill? And the reason I ask this is because with AI, I can basically figure out what makes you a good salesperson, and I can make everyone a good salesperson. So what happened to the poor person that was a really good salesperson, that had this skill, that had developed it? So the very notion of skills will change.
I mean, I think that people are unanimous in the fact that millennials and Gen Z have become so messed up by social media. Don't you pity the next generation? Aren't they going to get completely screwed up by AI?
No, because I think, for all the things that we say negative about artificial intelligence, we have to realize that AI is an iceberg. And as we know about icebergs, what's above the water is very little. What's underneath the water is huge, right? And what's underneath the water is actually social media, it's actually infrastructure, and those are the things that we did a really poor job at regulating. I mean, places like the UAE did a really good job at regulating, but other places didn't do a great job. So you have all sorts of rubbish online because the people aren't accountable. I worry because we'll have this interstitial generation, which is probably my kids' generation, that are actually going to be the same as when we went from no internet to dial-up to broadband. I saw the entire revolution.
Yeah, so did I.
Right? And so we had to learn really quickly to shapeshift because we just got used to something and then it changed again. So our kids, it's not about social, it's actually about how do you keep them being human. And that to me is empathy, critical thinking. And a lot of this is because actually human beings are very simple. We have 4 chemical reactions that decide,
so?
Right? No, we are. Right? We have 4 chemical reactions that decide how happy we are. There's serotonin, there's oxytocin, there's endorphins, and there's dopamine.
Right.
And the problem is, dopamine is like crack cocaine.
Right.
And if you can figure out how to get it, no, not from experience, but I'm just saying it's highly addictive. And so if kids are using technology too early, and they're instantly getting shots of like, oh yeah, you did a great job. Oh, life doesn't work that way. Life is about grit and patience to figure stuff out, and that's really the skill.
Makes sense. Okay, last couple of minutes, I want to talk a bit about industry. So we recently published a paper where we did a quantitative analysis on how AI is going to likely impact industries. We looked at 2 dimensions. One, workforce transformation, i.e. which jobs are going to be replaced, like a call center agent or a graphic designer. And the second axis was business model disruption. Which industries are going to have their entire business model upturned? For example, graphic design software, right? And when you look at each industry, you plot them on a 2x2 matrix, like what consultants like to do. And what we found is in the top right-hand corner, the industries that are most likely to get savaged by AI are going to be media, publishing, and software, right? I want to know your thoughts about this and what your perspectives are on which other industries could be significantly disrupted by AI and what those industries should do, either in response or to evolve in parallel with it.
So if I'm brutally honest and contrarian, I'd say that with where we've already reached with AI and platforms like Builder and others, we're already going to start to see the slow death of SaaS. And why is that? Software as a service was created on 3 fundamental principles. Principle 1, everyone needs the same thing. False. That's why we're spending 7 times the cost of the license to customize. Principle number 2, it's really expensive to build software. False. Now you can actually build software cheaper than when you get to like 30 seats on the usage of Salesforce, for example. And the principle number 3 was, well, I don't understand software, I can't hire enough people, and it's too complicated. False, because now we've got to a point where conversational AI can actually help you build application, which is not just writing code. It's the design, it's the wiring, it's the deployment, it's the maintenance, it's the running of it. And given how much of the world has a predisposition to SaaS, you're already seeing SaaS slow down, and it's going to see massive compression over the next decade.
Interesting. So you basically think AI is going to kill SaaS?
I've
heard that before.
I think if I was a betting man, I would short SaaS.
Okay, what other industries you think are going to get heavily impacted by AI?
I think positive impact will be in healthcare. Right? You'll be able to be much more preventative, much more predictive. I think
personalized medicine.
Personalize everything around healthcare, right? I think the other part which I'm really excited about is AI, and because of how AI works, you can simplify the user interface. By simplifying the user interface to really conversation and thinking, you've made it accessible to more people. So that means actually what we've seen in software where you had the haves and the have-nots, and there's always a gap, you're actually going to see that gap disappear. Because now everyone can be the haves.
Amazing. Fantastic. Ladies and gents, I think that's about all we have time for. Please give me a big round of applause for the wizard, Sachin, for enlightening us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Real pleasure.
Thanks.